All right, my fellow get gooders, I hope you're doing well. This is a fun but very familiar old school RPG. I enjoyed this game much more than the Outer Worlds 1, which you do not have to have played at all to play this game. The Outer Worlds 1, I felt like, and I guess the best way to describe it is that it felt like a very vanilla experience. I put about 10 to 15 hours ish into that, and I just put down the controller and I thought this game is perfectly fine but just doesn't do anything interesting to me. And that was that. But The Outer Worlds 2 is a better game than the first, so let's go ahead and break down why in the questions for casuals. As usual, this is my own unedited, uninterrupted gameplay because I feel it's the best way to show how a game actually plays instead of clipping it up into a collage of gameplay bits. You may not see every game menu or every enemy type, but you will get a better sense, I think, of how the game actually plays. This review is, of course, from a casual player's perspective. Those of us who don't have a lot of time, a lot of skill, a lot of money, high-end PCs, every console, those of us who don't chew through endgame content or 100% a game or get every achievement or have the time or the desire to play with others, which I think represents a lot of gamers, and I feel we are underrepresented on YouTube. So let's go ahead and get to question number one. Question number one, what is the best thing about this game? The best thing about this game is the myriad of ways that you can approach an objective, either with a combination of your skills, and they do a great job of spreading throughout the game various ways that your different skills can affect your playthrough, or through really clever level design, especially the interior design. You always have a multitude of ways to accomplish a goal. It rewards exploring because you could come across different paths to get into an area or to make your way through it. I don't hear enough discussion about how good the level design is in this game, and it should be appreciated how certain places connect to others, how individual objects are placed in the world that you can interact with your skills. This game demands multiple playthroughs, and if you really dig this game, I think there's going to be more than enough content here to satisfy you because you're going to want to experience the game in a lot of different ways, and Obsidian has made that extraordinarily possible here. Question number two, what is the worst thing about this game? The worst thing about this game is the old school nature of the story presentation here, the dated presentation. I think a lot of people are going to severely disagree with me on this because look, I've been playing these types of games for 20 years, and it's to be expected from games like this, especially by this company. And I've played games recently that have some of this dated presentation. However, in this modern age of gaming, with games like Red Dead Redemption 2 and The Last of Us, and I understand that Obsidian is a AA studio, but they're owned by Microsoft now and have access to a lot more resources. And with a very story-driven game with a lot of dialogue, it really sticks out when game characters are not presented through motion-captured performances. Not all games need this, but this game, which is a 1950s sci-fi adventure comic book, I really believe that you need actors with comedic timing to bring that satirical humor and over-the-top tone and social commentary to life. The mouth animations were so poor that it often looked like the words weren't matching up, and you ended up just reading dialogue and not even looking at the characters, like you're listening to an audiobook and reading the book at the same time. I understand that games like this one are built with this style of presentation, and that most gamers accept that. But it really does stand out more nowadays with better technology, more resources, and examples of games that do it extremely well. Question 3. What is the most visually impressive part of this game? The most visually impressive part of this game to me is the weapon design. Some of these weapons just look so cool, and the animations for reloading them are really great as well. It reminds me of the Borderlands games, which always had really good weapon design, and I feel like most people, they would probably focus on the environment design, and while I think some of them are really beautiful looking, like the Planet Praetor and the underground section of the Frost Planet Cloister, I don't think enough love is being shown to how great these weapons look. Also, my PC didn't handle this game that well visually, which I'll get into a bit later, so that dampened the impressiveness of the art design for me. Question number 4. How good is the sound design, voice acting, and music in this game? I was surprised at how damn good the guns sounded. The audio design is great, and Obsidian has been making these games for over 20 years, and their voice acting direction has always been amongst the best in the industry. Very rarely is there ever a bad performance. The menu music is memorable, but apart from that, no other score in the soundtrack really stands out to me. As far as performances go, the performance of the Moon Man in particular stands out. He was extremely funny. That guy cracked me up. Question number 5. How does this game control, and is there a preferred method? Because this game is a first-person shooter, if you have the ability to use a keyboard and mouse and are comfortable doing so, you should favor that over a controller. For me personally, I like using a controller, and since I use the explosive skill, which I'll go into in the tips and tricks question, precise aiming wasn't as much of a concern. You can really tune the level of auto aim on the controller in the options menu, so also keep that in mind. This isn't a game with a million buttons to press for different skills, and it's not something competitive like Escape from Tarkov or Counter-Strike, so just play with what makes you feel the most comfortable. I didn't like how you press the weapon wheel button once and it would stay open. I felt more comfortable holding it and then moving to what I wanted and then letting go. Maybe I've just been trained by other games to do that, and I didn't see an option to be able to change it. Other than that, it was pretty straightforward as far as controls go. Question number 6, what is the most impressive and least impressive gameplay system? In a game like this, I was really surprised about how good the shooting mechanics were. You don't expect too much in the way of combat in games like this, and believe me, this is no Destiny or Battlefield, but shooting felt really good in this game. It's not the most dynamic combat, there's not enemies dropping in and objects flying around from explosions and environmental destruction, but nevertheless, it was a fun and engaging combat experience. Kudos to Obsidian for delivering the best shooting I've experienced in a story-driven game like this. The least impressive was the companion system. They were not at all that interesting as characters, you couldn't romance any of them, and they didn't even have too much to say to you or each other out in the field that I found memorable. Some of them barely registered as characters at all to me, fairly disappointing. Does this game have a good narrative, or is it filled with plot holes? Despite the presentation, the story in this game is what hooked me initially. It had some strong Mass Effect vibes. You're a commander of a ship with a crew of companions working for a faction called the Earth Directorate, and your mission is to meet up with another agent who has embedded herself within a corporation controlled by an overly authoritative government-like faction, so that we can discover why the slip drives that enable interstellar travel have been causing rifts in the fabric of space. That's pretty badass stuff. It has some very poignant social commentary here as well about how the extremes of both sides of the political spectrum can mirror each other. It's very smartly written and it's extremely funny. But there are pacing issues here. Like when you catch up to your primary antagonist, directly after that, the story feels like it resets, and now you have a new objective, and you have to choose between which faction you're going to aid so they can aid you in completing it. Pretty shortly after this, you can go directly to the end of the story. It's a disjointed feeling narrative, and throughout it I had gaps in playtime, and I was losing some of the finer plot points, and as that continued, I half checked out by the end. I stopped reading terminals and listening to audio logs and asking more detailed questions through dialogue. Look, I think the main issue here, besides my obviously short attention span, is that the world of the Outer Worlds is just not that interesting to me. The worlds of Fallout and the Elder Scrolls are more interesting, Mass Effect's world is more interesting, and games like this really ultimately rely on how invested you become in the universe. I think that motion captured or more detailed performances would have gone a long way here, like the opening cutscene for instance with Commander Zane and Buddy. The resources invested would have greatly paid off. Question 8, how does this game rank as a casual experience? Well, the difficulty in this game can only be described as schizophrenic. Early on, I almost felt like I had to up the difficulty. That's right, you heard that correctly. I said up the difficulty. Look, casualness, when it comes to games, is a spectrum, kind of like autism, which I'm sure all the elites think we have. And there are those who don't want any resistance at all, and a lot of games now provide a story mode for those people. This game does as well. But I do think some resistance is good for that feeling of progression, especially in RPGs. I've liked more difficult games in the past, like V Rising, which was really good, but early on in the Outer Worlds 2, it was so easy I felt like maybe I needed a little more resistance, but that was quickly dispelled when certain side missions early on with boss fights essentially kicked my ass, and then towards the end of the first planet, every enemy had a skull on its head, indicating it was a tough challenge for my level, and they were right. The game directs you to level up if you're too low for certain areas, so in the game's defense, these difficulty spikes are signaled to you. But I feel like I died a lot in this game, and then at a certain point, I just started stomping everything in my path, and there was no risk of death at all. I know it's hard to balance a game like this with different playstyles, but as a casual, I would caution that you either play on story mode or do all the side content to keep your level high to avoid too much resistance. I'll add some more to this in the tips and tricks question. Question number 9, is the amount of content in the game acceptable and is it worth the purchase price? I don't think this game is worth the $70 asking price. It's going to depend on how much you end up really enjoying a game, which is in hindsight, and therefore it's not helpful when you spend that money on something not worth it. So for instance, I really like the Elder Scrolls games, and if you told me I had to pay $70 for Skyrim, I would gladly pay it, and I would pay it for Elder Scrolls 6. But games like this are built for Game Pass. Games like Avowed and Atomfall also feel this way. It's definitely on the shorter side for most gamers, but for us casuals, I think it's enough. And nowadays, I appreciate these shorter experiences because I know I can finish them. But this game still isn't worth $70, so again, a game built for Game Pass. And now I'm going to make a case for Game Pass at its current price point against my better judgment. So here it goes. I know that all Microsoft wants to do is grab our bank accounts by the tits and squeeze and twist to milk all the money out of those puppies, but just hear me out. Back in the latter days of Blockbuster, you could rent a game for 7 days for anywhere between $8 to $12 in my area. I can't remember the exact price. New, very popular releases you'd only have for 5 days before you have to start paying late fees, which if anyone remembers would be pretty steep, where you're taking out a bank loan to pay them off, though they did remove them for a while, I think. You'd also have to get in your car and drive there and hope the game was even available to rent and then finish the game and then get back there in time to avoid said late fees. I basically rented The Outer Worlds 2 on PC for $17.84 for 30 days. If we average the price at $10 for Blockbuster, it would cost me $42 as well as all the driving back and forth. Now, $30 a month on Game Pass is certainly not great, but it still would be less than the price for renting it from Blockbuster, though now we're reaching almost half the price of the actual game. As said previously, this game and others similar to it, Atomfall, Avowed, even games that aren't on there like Hell Is Us, they feel like they're built for Game Pass, and I wonder if Game Pass itself just existing is helping bring back the AA game, because for a while there weren't as many as there are now. So there it is, just some food for thought, as they say. Question number 10. Any helpful tips or tricks for this game? As mentioned before, in order to stay ahead of the game, so to speak, try to do as much side content as possible in order to avoid difficulty spikes. If you want to focus on damage and damage resistance, go for guns and engineering. Engineering is a very well-rounded skill. It provides damage resistance, dialogue options, story objective workarounds, and you could take a perk that increases your damage with modded weapons, which I mean any weapons you use should have mods in it. Plus, at max, you get another mod slot for your armor. Now, guns increase your damage, obviously, and this is for all types of guns, save for explosives, which is why I recommend it. However, I took explosives because I wanted to try something different and modded my weapons for explosive damage. Not everyone will want to do this, but what ended up happening was that I basically was resistant to all explosives, so I could just walk over mines and ignore grenades eventually, and because I had used explosive ammo, I could do damage to multiple enemies and I could shoot near them, especially helpful when they're behind cover, and I could still kill them. Very helpful to us casuals who don't have laser precise aim. The medical skill could also be useful because it's your healing skill. Basically try to focus on 2 main skills with 1 or 2 others to level up a bit to support you. Also, I was chewing through ammo a lot, and fortunately I took Innovative for my background, which allowed me to get more from crafting, and I also accepted a flaw that increased vendor prices by 25% but gave me 25% chance to get more materials when I broke something down for parts. So I was able to consistently craft ammo, though this focus on crafting meant money was not abundant. Question number 11. Does this game need more technical support or was it supported well? I haven't dealt with any bugs or really any little glitches for that matter. I will say though that the game's optimization isn't that great for my PC, which is about 5 years old at this point, so it's to be expected. However, Dying Like the Beast ran on higher settings than my PC was supposed to be able to handle, and it looked and ran beautifully. This game had muddy textures in the environment, and the NPCs didn't look great either. I'm a casual, I'm not sitting there tweaking settings all the time. How the game compiles everything early is generally how I play it, while maybe doing some minor tweaks, but overall smooth gameplay experience, just not the best looking game with the settings for my personal PC. Question number 12. What changes would you make to improve this game? I mentioned a few things before, like more detailed performances and the companion system, but in addition, I think early on there wasn't enough combat. And it was so much fun, and I felt like there just wasn't enough to shoot, as sick as that sounds. This does improve in the second half of the game, but speaking of not enough to shoot, the open sections of the game do feel more on the barren side, and the first area in particular didn't feel that open. It felt more directed than an open area should. So adding the ability to explore with more enemies to engage with would improve things. Also in regards to combat, I felt a lot of times like I needed to take cover because receiving damage didn't register to me that well. No controller feedback, so I would have to watch my health instead of instinctively knowing when to get out of harm's way or listening to my companions add, a comment, hey, you're low on health, or, get out of the way, dickhead. And adding reactive cover, like in a game like Far Cry, with some added level design for cover, I think would help. A codex that actually could provide information on the world and not just act as an instruction manual would help us understand more of what's going on. That would be an improvement as well, even including something that could summarize the plot. Question number 13. At what point do you start to feel fatigued with this game, if at all? I started feeling fatigued around the 15 to 20 hour mark when the previously mentioned story reset happened. The formula was apparent at this point, and I felt like I was beginning again. I was starting over again into a new story, when technically that wasn't true. and I seriously wonder, looking back now, if I wasn't reviewing the game as this hobby I'm doing, would I have actually finished it? I'm glad I kept going though, because my character build started to take off shortly afterwards, and I started having more fun with the game. It could definitely be a slow burn in some ways, but again, I think the difficulty and the pacing is a bit schizophrenic as well. Question 14. Does this game have any gaming pet peeves of yours? I hate when games have an overhead map and the point you move on the map to hover over an icon magnetizes to said icon, but always goes to the wrong one. If I'm on the region map, have the point be more likely to magnetize to the fast travel point. I mean, come on. I'm trying to fast travel. I can switch to the quest I want through the journal. Also, and this is for this game only, it does this weird thing where it lets you load into the game early before all the assets are there, so it will sometimes not let you move but look around, or look around but not move. And I get that most of the time you can at least bring up your inventory for a bit while it loads, but just let me wait a few seconds longer so I can just go where I want. It's such a weird thing, and the only game I've ever seen do that. Question 15. Should this game either be single player or multiplayer, or have both? Games like this are generally single-player games, and that's fine with me. I'm a casual. I can't line up times with friends very often, and I'm not advocating for a full party of players here like an MMO, like World of Warcraft or something. But it would be a lot of fun to just have one other player join you, maybe as a companion to help keep the game balanced, but having another player could be a lot of fun in these games, though maybe more so in a game that is more open like Fallout or The Elder Scrolls. Question 16. Should this game have a prequel, sequel, or remaster? Well, it does have a prequel, and it's too new for a remaster, but I think most people who play this would like to see a sequel, but would like to see more from it than what we got. I'd like to see the changes I mentioned before implemented, but I would be curious to see what improvements the developers decided to make, so looking at previews for The Outer Worlds 3, and then waiting for reviews to drop, would be how I would decide to play or not. Because after 2 games, and look, this one is better than the first, it's still not hitting that well for me. But it is a franchise that has gotten better over time, unlike a franchise, say like Dying Light, which has gotten worse, though the Beast has course-corrected that one a bit. So The Outer Worlds 3 would be a wait and see for me. Question 17. What innovations did this game introduce, refine, or popularize? The flaws system was in the original Outer Worlds, but they definitely expanded it here, and they have more interesting flaws with much better choices to make when selecting them. It's a system that adds a layer of depth to your playthrough and gives you another reason to have subsequent playthroughs. It's not an original idea, having to take a negative stat to gain a positive one, but they refined this system in this game, and it makes for a more thought-provoking and interesting experience. Question 18. How does this game compare to the developer's other titles? I still think that the Knights of the Old Republic 2 is their best game. I played New Vegas and I liked it, but I came across a game-breaking bug and didn't want to restart another playthrough at that time. I really liked it though, and I know a lot of players think it's their best, but I have to go back and play that one at some point. I really like Grounded. That's up there as well, as just a really fun, well-designed game. But The Outer Worlds 2 is maybe more in the middle of their library, above the first game in Avowed, which I quickly felt was a vanilla experience as well. Question 19. How does this game compare to others in its genre? This game is comparable to the KOTOR series, the Mass Effect games, as well as the Fallout games. As the tongue-in-cheek thumbnail suggests, I don't think it reaches the heights of any of them. I think almost all the games in those series are better than this one, even Fallout 4, which is certainly flawed, but I spent a lot of time playing. 76 I did not play, but that's more of an MMO experience. So again, while The Outer Worlds 2 isn't a bad game, it just doesn't compare to the other games that have inspired it. Question 20. How is this game received by the broader gaming community? It has been perceived pretty favorably by critics, pretty much in line with what I've been saying here, which was a surprise to me. I thought it was going to be better received than my perspective. What I was definitely surprised at was it seems the user reviews were more negative, with gamers feeling close to what I was feeling, but definitely more negative than what I was feeling. A lot of complaints were levied at the length versus the cost, and that's an issue, but not as much for us casuals. I mean, it took me almost 30 hours just to finish the story, and some side content and companion quests. Question 21. What games would you recommend if you enjoyed this game? I mentioned a few before, like Avowed and Atomfall I think would be enjoyable if you like this one. Probably Starfield as well. But I really suggest going back if you haven't yet played the KOTOR games. I know there's been a remaster talk for some time, but for the first game, that's a ways out, I think. At least the remaster for the first game. I don't even know if they're remastering the second game. And the remaster is not out till 2027, I think, at the earliest. You can get both those games on PC right now for like $5 each, and you'll be primed for Fate of the Old Republic, the new one that was just announced when that comes out. Question number 22. What is the main theme or takeaway from this game? With this question, I'd like to stick with the tone of it, but also diverge a bit and say that at the risk of getting a little too deep or dark here, that this game has some very prescient social commentary about our world, as mentioned before. This world that we inhabit appears to have an inexhaustible tolerance for both cruelty and suffering, and it seems to be on a path right now to be consumed by them. And so these digitally crafted spaces for us to play around in can be not only extremely fun, but also very soothing, because they allow us to escape from the world for a while. So don't let anyone make you feel bad for finding some time when you have it to escape into one of these games, because they don't really understand that this hobby that we all share can really be therapeutic, because we're able to lose the real world for a while and enter a different one. So with that said, stay sane, play some games. So in conclusion here, I like to give review scores as it's a nice way to sum up your thoughts, and game review systems are usually way too broad, so I use the film review score system because it's easy to apply and understand. So 1 star is bad, 2 stars is average, 3 stars is good, 4 stars is a must play, with half-star increments to provide some nuance where needed. The Outer Worlds 2 is a 2.5-star game. It's an above-average game. It has very witty, smart, sharp writing with great humor, surprisingly good gunplay, and a myriad of choices and options that will provide those who really enjoy it with multiple playthroughs. It is, however, suffering from uninteresting companions that join you on your journey, dated presentation when it comes to its storytelling, and a world that isn't as interesting as others in its genre. Since storytelling is such a major focus of this game, these things really detract from the overall experience, as games like this are at the mercy of the worlds they provide us with. Gamers who prefer this type of RPG, I think, will really enjoy it, so keep that in mind if you're one of them. But in the end, I feel like most will be left wanting more out of the experience like I was, even though I had some fun with it as well. So with that said, stay casual, and I'll see you in the next one, which is going to be a look back at a little rewind review of one of the greatest games ever made. See ya.